for Thursday, December 4th, 2025. Today is Thursday, so it's Jupiter's Day, and the themes of expansion, story, belief, and meaning are louder. Jupiter energy wants you to ask the big questions like, what do I believe? What am I learning? And how do I want my life to expand? So keep that in your pocket as we talk about this chart for today. Jupiter's showing up a lot here. So I cast this for 6 a.m. from my location using equal house system, but I do take whole sign into consideration. And we will go deeper in that as time goes on in this school so you all understand what I mean. Now, the sun is at 12 degrees and 32 minutes of Sagittarius. We've got Scorpio rising at 26 degrees. Now, back to that sun though. In our 3-scoop language, with Sagittarius being the first scoop, right? Aries being the second scoop, and Taurus being the third scoop. So Sagittarius energy in the Aries decan and the Taurus Dawad. So it almost feels like big fire with a push to act, but there's an earthy undertone to it for grounding to hold that expansion. Now, the moon is at 5 degrees and 14 minutes of Gemini, and we're building into the full moon today, later this evening. That's when it's going to pop off. But that Gemini moon is active, curious, and ready to talk. Its ruler Mercury sits in Scorpio in the 12th house, and it's about 22 degrees and 28 minutes of Scorpio, which reads a Scorpio energy in the Cancer decan and cutting into, almost into the Leo Dawad. So Mercury's deep, private, and about to nudge into bolder flavor because by the time the full moon happens, that's what she'll be in, that territory that Mercury, I said she, look at me personifying the planets, as I tend to do sometimes. But there's a lot here. The headline's very simple though. The full moon, again, you're going to hear me flub words sometimes. I'm a Mercury and Pisces person who also has Neptune in the third, which feels like double Mercury and Pisces. But anyway, the full moon in Gemini versus the sun in Sagittarius gives conversations versus meaning, data versus the narrative, the local immediate story versus the big map, like national news versus local news type energy. And because Mercury, the moon's ruler, is in Scorpio on the 12th, a lot of this plays out under the surface. Hidden messages, private processing, research on the low, or things that surface slowly and then demand that you must say them. I'm curious to know how many of you are feeling that. Full moons call things into completion and into the light. So Gemini Sagittarius is a polarity about communication versus belief. It's one of the many things you could look at it as. So for the Gemini moon, notice the small facts, the questions, the details, the text, the curiosities, the curiosity that wants to be satisfied now. It's talkative, social, restless, and information hungry. Meanwhile, if you look at the Sagittarius sun, it wants meaning, philosophy, direction, and to tell the story that makes the facts matter. So under this full moon, you may find that an idea that's been pinging in small ways is suddenly asking, hey, I want to take form. Let me out. Be it through a post, a conversation, a decision, or you may realize that the way you've been framing a belief is really out of sync with real day-to-day information. Gemini gives you the receipts, but Sag wants to rewrite the book. So think of those two energies playing against one another. And because Mercury rules the moon and sits in Scorpio's 12th, Scorpio in the 12th, I should say, many of the Gemini signals are landing through confidential channels. And since the 12th house represents things like dreams, you can look at it that way. Late night messages, private research, or a thought you stew on quietly before you share it with anybody. These are all themes. So expect some truths to arrive sideways. This could be an inner download. It could be a text you almost didn't open, or a memory that suddenly comes rushing to the fore that reframes a long-held belief you've had. So this is important and potent energy. Now, a few quick ingredients that are changing up the flavor just a bit today. We've got Venus, Mars, and Juno in Sagittarius in the first house. So there's a fire in how we're presenting ourselves. Commitments, attraction, and how we assert ourselves has a big, bold tone. Now, Juno and Mars makes the who I'm committed to question louder, and this is definitely reverberating into the moon sun story. The something that needs said that's been unnerving you, that you've kind of kept under wraps, whatever that might be, direct it appropriately to the party that it needs to go to. And do so with it in mind that there's actually value in this sort of exchange, even if it's something uncomfortable, okay? Now, Mercury and Scorpio in the 12th house, going back to that private intel and emotional truth feeling is kind of like woven together. So watch out for things that are processed in private but need public translation later. So in other words, even if you do receive some sort of information out of nowhere through maybe a confidential source, you might want to hold on to that until you've been able to peep the scene fully, right? There's a lot going on today. Now, Uranus is still retrograde in the late degrees of Taurus. And we're still going through some of this uncomfortable energy that kind of takes us by surprise and gives a jolt that forces us to rethink about boundaries, partnerships, all sorts of things. So this is continuing, and it's been like this for a while. And then since the sun is basically in the Aries Decan and the Taurus Dawad, we're getting the flavor of, there's some of that Aryan energy pushing us to initiate, while at the same time, the Taurus Dawad is saying, or asking, that whatever you start needs to be actually anchored in real resources. Something tangible, something valuable, something sustainable. Now, how this could feel today, you could get some burst of information. Check your DMs, maybe read an article, maybe it's through a thread on social media. Something that forces you to reevaluate something that you've largely held on to as a belief. And your routine might be interrupted by an idea or maybe a message that won't leave you alone. And that's the full moon energy building, asking you to integrate small facts into a new timeline. You got to pull out what's true. Now, private processing is definitely happening. So a lot of us could have an emotional reaction that feels sudden, but it's actually been simmering in the 12th house Mercury area. So it's not so sudden. It's just finally rising to the top. So you want to give yourself some space to sort things out internally before you speak on them, like I said. You got to put the pieces together. Collecting the information is one thing, and being able to synthesize it to really understand it is a whole other. And relationship energy can definitely spike. There might be some bold declarations, questions about commitment, or maybe you have a desire for more freedom and truth from others. This is interesting energy. Some of this might feel abrupt or as if it's pushing on your boundaries, but the spikes are needed because there's so much. By the time we get to 2026, y'all, there's so much we need. So here's some practical ways you can work with the energy today. Take your time and collect those little, small, tiny, little, teeny, weeny facts. Do a quick inbox sweep. There might be something that you missed. You might have to jot down messages or bits of info that feel important as you're going about your day-to-day. And I know sometimes I keep a running note list of things that come up within a day's span. This is a day for that. The Gemini moon is definitely rewarding organized curiosity, even though Gemini is the more all the information expression of Mercury, while I think of Virgo more about the details. Don't forget the Virgoan part, right? Now, going back to taking some time out to process things in private with that Mercury and Scorpio in the 12th house energy. My suggestion is to take maybe 20 to 30 minutes to either sit in silence, journal, maybe do like a quick meditative walk, something like that, before you respond to something that you know is likely a bit unnerving. Use that 20 to 30 minutes. And you want to ask one clarifying question. Again, I am big on this. This is like a new thing that I have adopted into my life. So if there's something that is just a lot, it's important to ask a clarifying question instead of making a huge assumption, right? You have to kind of, I guess, honor Gemini's curiosity with Sagittarius's need to clarify, kind of merge those things together. And you want to check your commitments. Y'all, if a conversation feels off with somebody today, don't just do what that person wants just because, you feel compelled to. Pay attention to what your body is telling you. Pay attention to any information you may be picking up on the low. There's a lot of different things coming that I shouldn't even say may, that will have you question your commitments. Now, here's a quick affirmation coming up to this full moon that you can use. I welcome the facts. I trust the lesson, and I hold my truth before I broadcast it. I think that'll be very important. I think that it will serve you well if you're able to keep that in mind today. So that's your daily drip for Thursday, December 4th, 2025. And I appreciate you guys being here with me in this community. I love you.